Hello and welcome to Twisted Britain, a podcast on true crime in Britain with a sprinkling of the weird and macabre. And your hosts are me, Bob Dale.
And me, Ali Downey.
Don't really know what happened there at the beginning, Ali. I just kind of forgot how to speak.
That's happened quite a lot tonight.
Bob. It has, hasn't it? This is our second episode recording of this evening. And I hadn't even finished my first pint and I couldn't talk earlier.
No, Bob's had some problems with issues tonight.
I did have some problems with some issues. It's not a great problem for a podcaster to have.
No.
At the beginning of a recording.
No.
But we'll get there. But best solution and cure I have for it is you telling me a case.
That's exactly what's going to happen.
That's what's going to happen. We are on part 3.
That's right. We're on part 3 of what I have been calling the Teacup Poisoner trilogy.
Before we get on to part 3, however, I'd just like to bring us back to a moment, not 5 minutes ago, Alistair, where you said the beautiful folklorish words that there are no fairies in Scandinavia because they're too cold.
Yeah, they all died of cold. We learned that there's no tooth fairy in Scandinavia. They only have a tooth troll.
Which I prefer tooth troll, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. It's because you can imagine a troll collecting teeth. They're kind of manky.
I've always wondered, what does the tooth fairy do with all the teeth?
Yeah.
That's a weird thing, isn't it?
It is.
But as long as
anybody who's interested should read Terry Pratchett's The Hogfather.
Oh, wonderful book. Oh, I tell you what, I was listening to say, Al, before we go any further on to Teacup Part 3. I've been listening a lot to Kirsty Young's new podcast, Young Again, and she interviews famous people, and basically the premise of the show is, what would you tell your younger self, given the knowledge you have now? And I like that premise as a thing. But
don't do it.
just no.
Yeah.
Just go with no. But it was Philip Pullman that was the interviewee
of his Dark Materials.
And telling us about his life and everything like that. But he's such a consummate professional that he managed to end up interviewing Kirsty Young halfway through. I love it. And you're sitting there going, there's 2 wonderful sets of voices. And I listened to that on the walk up to me and you.
Nice.
So I shall not compare us to what we've listened to this evening.
No, don't.
Anyway, you've got some more horribleness.
I've got the next part in this, what I'm now going to have to call a mini-series, because the trilogy has become at least a quadrology.
What's after quadrology?
Quintology?
Quintology, yeah. Nah, syncology?
Syncology.
Don't know. If
but
you know,
I'm not actually sure.
Let us know.
Let us know in the comment section. Because it might turn into that.
It might do. Can you give us a recap of where we're at?
I can indeed. Let's. You're right. First, have a quick recap of where we left the story of the Teacup Poisoner. As a young boy, from the age of 11 to 13, he had experimented on his friends and family by poisoning them with non-lethal doses of various poisons, and then finally killing his stepmother, although he was never actually charged for her murder.
And the bit that I would just add to that and I only know this case from what you've told me, so I don't know the end to this case. Alan at the bar, I told him what we were about to record, and he was like, I can't believe this happened. I went, shh, I haven't heard the end yet. And I have deliberately not looked this one up at all.
And you still won't have heard the end by the end of this episode.
Great. The bit that I would add to that, though, is it wasn't poisoning people with non-lethal doses. The bit that sticks in my head was it was almost self-synthesized poisons. He was refining things to create poisons.
Yes, it was.
And then he was doing human trials.
Yes.
It's not just a case of non-lethal doses. He was trying a bit more, and then helping people get well again, and then bam, bam, bam. That's the bit that's mad.
It is wild.
And that's where my memory of the last couple of episodes is at. So
it was very, very wild. It was done to satisfy the boy's obsession with poisons and with toxicology. He was charged with poisoning his family and friends, although not the murder of his stepmother, and the boy was sentenced to 15 years in the Broadmoor medical facility. While he was a patient in Broadmoor, he was diagnosed and treated for various neuropsychiatric disorders. He was very intelligent, but he had no moral sense or any sense of empathy whatsoever, which was evidenced by the way he coldly tested poisons on his friends and his family, which would actually leave his father with lifelong health issues And he ended up killing his stepmother as well.
And the killing of the stepmother was deliberate.
That was deliberate and premeditated. Now, after 8 years of treatment, he was declared mentally cured and fit for release by Broadmoor's head psychiatrist, Dr. Urwin.
Not rehabilitated, mentally cured.
Mentally cured.
It's a very interesting choice of words.
There's documentation that he was cured.
Cured.
That's the wording used.
So they believed he was sick?
Mentally unwell.
Yeah.
They believed he was suffering from a psychiatric disorder.
But it was a curable disorder.
Or a controllable disorder.
Controllable. Controllable is probably a better word, but yeah. Mental.
It is. Now, the patient was released back into society in 1971. However, looking back at the evidence now, it seems obvious that the patient was not, in fact, cured. His obsession with poisons remained, along with a number of other disturbing behaviours that really should have been spotted at the time.
Yeah. But then I suppose if you're announcing that somebody is mentally cured, you're probably not in the best of places to make actual judgments.
It's true. Now, we're going to pick up the story right from the time that he was let out of Broadmoor on the 4th of February, 1971.
It's so close to now.
Yes. First, he spent 2 days with his sister, Winifred.
As you would.
Before he moved on to stay in Slough. He was released initially into a sort of former felon training scheme for the reformed, where he could learn a trade and through which he could also find a job.
Like a, what do they call it when you come out of the army? You get a something.
Apprenticeship?
No, it's like it's a word, it'll come to me at some point, but that pays for you to go and retrain to do something.
Exactly.
There's like an out capital to get you on your way.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Now, the training centre was in Slough, and he would live in an affiliated hostel for the duration of his time there.
Okay.
He moved in to the hostel on the 6th of February, and he immediately struck up a friendship with a fellow resident, Trevor Sparks.
Affiliated hostel being...
a hostel that people who stayed while they were doing this training course.
Oh, so it wasn't a stopgap from jail out or anything. It was solely to do with...
This training centre. And the pair struck up an instant rapport, and the two men shared a bottle of wine together on his first night in the hostel.
Lovely.
That very night, Trevor Sparks was woken in the night by terrible stomach cramps, vomiting and diarrhoea, accompanied by severe pain in his testicles.
May I speculate?
Yes.
Has he been poisoned?
Yes, he has. The symptoms persisted for 5 days, with Sparks unable to finish a game of football due to further pains in his abdomen. And when an Englishman gives up football, you know it's serious.
He retired to play cricket.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means, but there you are.
Now, this was the first instance of poisoning.
Ever?
No, since the release of our patient.
So this is there's been a gap
of 48 hours. It took just over 48 hours for the man to become a poisoner again.
From release?
From release. And begin administering toxins to people to satisfy his own curiosity and ego.
And how long was he in for?
8 years.
So he's just sat for 8 years going, gonna poison someone else.
Yeah, and for the last few years of his time in Broadmoor, he was fooling the administrators and psychiatrists into making them think that he was fit for release.
Well, we did talk about this in one of the previous episodes. He wasn't dumb.
No.
Incredibly intelligent.
He's a very intelligent man.
And I'm not giving props to him at all, but, like, the facts of the matter are, like, the ability to not synthesize the drugs, I used the wrong word earlier, but refine the drugs.
Refine the drugs. To a certain extent, manufacture the drugs. He was teaching people in the Broadmoor Medical Facility to grow botulism.
Of course he was. There's a level there, but, like, he's obviously been also smart enough to convince parole to let him out. And then he's just literally gone, ha ha ha.
Yeah.
Poison again.
Yeah, instantly. Now, the man would be at the training centre and therefore at the hostel for 3 months while he learned industrial storekeeping. During this time,
a worrying number of residents showed up with unexplained illnesses. A total of 5 men and 1 woman, many of whom had symptoms which should have and would now raise big red toxin flags to any doctor, such as sudden hair loss.
And they would have been on the lookout for it, knowing the fact that he's out of jail?
Later investigations could only actually speculate on what toxin the man was using this early in his return to poisoning. His first recorded attempts to buy deadly controlled substances were on the 17th of April, when he unsuccessfully tried to buy antimony potassium tartrate from a chemist in London on Broadmoor Street, using a false name.
Wonder what he was going to use that for.
We'll find out, because on this occasion the pharmacist Albert Keane refused the man, unless he had written reasonable authority for the purchase. But we're now certain that the man has returned fully to his former behaviours and he's not going to be deterred so easily. He returns to John Bell and Croydon's chemist on the 24th of April, now with a forged handwritten note from Bedford College, London University, authorising him to buy 25 grams of the poisonous chemical.
So he came back with the paperwork that he required?
Yeah, forged, but yes.
Oh yes, but he came back with the paperwork he required.
Yes, and this time Albert Keane, the chemist, relents and allows the man to buy it.
Even though he knows he's refused him sale before.
Yeah, he's come back with the required documentation.
Yeah. I'd still be a bit wary about it.
They were selling all sorts of
shit to
controlled
anyone.
chemical to anyone back then. Now, this purchase happens coincidentally just before he starts a new job after the completion of his training on the 7th of May. This job will be assistant storekeeper for John Hadland Photographic Instrumentation Limited.
With access to chemicals?
Yes, with access to chemicals, but he didn't need access to chemicals.
That's true. But he
had access to chemicals.
Already?
Yeah, already.
I was thinking darkroom shit.
But no, he's already poisoning people.
There is that, yeah, there is.
Now, you would have probably loved John Hadland, actually. They developed high-tech camera equipment, mostly for the defence industry.
Oh yeah, I would be into that.
Yeah, they developed the world's first camera that could take 6 million images per second, which was actually the world record for many years.
We're going to say that again?
They developed the world's first camera that could take 6 million images per second.
That's incredibly fast.
It is. This was the world record for many years.
So I've used a camera that shoots 10,000 frames a second.
Yeah.
And you have to stop down the quality of the picture to get it to go that fast. And we used it to film 1870s pistol revolver, the bullet coming out the end, and the sparks and all that kind of stuff. That's mad slow. What are you saying, 6 million?
6 million per second.
I mean, it'd take about an hour and a half to watch that second back.
Yeah.
At
least.
I want to do that maths now. 25 frames a second. Come back to me.
It is a lot. Actually, I was watching a documentary the other night showing off Caltech's magic camera. It takes 70 trillion per second.
Say that again. 70 trillion.
70 trillion.
Now I have to work out how long that's going to take to watch back, aren't I?
That's 70 to the power of 12 for anybody who's interested.
I mean, I am slightly interested, I'll give you that. But
that is also so fast that they can capture light waves in motion.
Pretty good then.
Yeah, some camera. I think it's the size of a small building. And it uses lasers. Anyway, where were we? The man now has a job with John Hadland Limited in Bovingdon as assistant storeman. He begins on the 10th of May, 1971.
Okay.
Bovingdon, not to be mistaken with Bovington, where the Badass Tank Museum is.
Okay. Did you have to throw up the horns when you said Badass Tank?
I did indeed, yeah.
I enjoyed it, thank you.
Now, he was liked by many of the staff, although they all did notice his odd habits and his eccentricities, such as constantly reading medical textbooks, and his general lack of empathy, and his strange interest in Nazism and death.
I mean, the last two are probably the worst of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know 6 million frames, if you shot it in 1 second, would take you nearly 2 years to watch it?
Oh my God.
I might have done that maths wrong, if I'm being honest.
But maybe.
But we'll go with it.
Yeah, after 3 or 4 beers, maybe.
It's Weirdly, I think it works out as 666 days. It's the devil's number, baby.
In the comments section, please check Bob's
Oh,
math.
please do. If it was 25 frames a second, 6 million frames is how long? I think it's the devil's number in days.
Oh, God. I think it's worth mentioning that the man was still receiving regular visits from a probation officer, Susan Vidal, and less regular follow-up visits from Broadmoor's staff, like Dr. Maynett.
To check up on him?
Yes. None of these reports suggested any significant change in the man's behaviour, so nothing to be concerned about. He was no longer a danger to society.
So whilst he's poisoning, he's still managing to convince people that he's absolutely fine.
Yes.
Fuck,
Including psychiatrists.
it's terrifying.
In his new workplace, the man had integrated very well into the close-knit family-owned company. He seemed to be enjoying his work, and he was liked, if not understood, by the rest of the staff. His boss, Bob Eagle, found him a hard-working, if a little odd, employee.
Great name.
Good name.
Not Eagle, just the Bob bit.
Yeah. Do you think so, Bob? The man frequently fetched tea for his co-workers from the staff canteen, and on more than one occasion, another store worker and secretary, Diana Smart, noticed that he always used spoons from a drawer in the storeroom, and he was always very careful about putting them back.
Okay.
Within a week of the man starting his new job, he was already poisoning his co-workers.
Of course he was.
And so began a sad series of events quite familiar to anyone who remembers the crimes of his childhood. One by one, workers and staff at John Hadland Limited started falling ill.
You surprise me massively.
Two of the earliest to feel the effects were Dorothy and Bob Eagle. This long-term, happily married couple had both been working for John Hadland for many years. Dorothy was in administration, and Bob was the head storeman, making him the man's directly boss.
Okay.
Directly boss? Direct boss.
Okay. Directly boss.
Directly boss. Both Bob and Dorothy had daily contact with and frequently accepted cups of tea from the man when he offered to fetch them.
Oh, I mean, you don't say no to a cup of tea if somebody's making it.
Nobody says no to a cup of tea. But by June, the couple had both been suffering violent sickness, diarrhea, and back and joint pain for weeks, which repeated referrals to doctors couldn't figure out or effectively treat.
Funny that, because it's not really a disease they've got, is it?
No.
They're suffering from what I'd like to name co-worker poisoning syndrome.
Yeah, they are. That's exactly what it is. On Friday the 4th of June, Dr. Robert Neville saw Dorothy, who was bedridden with her joint pain, and he could find no biological cause for her symptoms, but he did give her antibiotics on general principle and told Bob to call him if her symptoms or his symptoms grew any worse.
Here's some antibiotics, because I don't really know what it is, but off you trot and give us a shout if you're sick.
Yeah. On Saturday the 5th of June, the next day, in fact, the man once again called in at John Bell and Croydon's chemist, this time purchasing thallium acetate as well as more antimony.
I mean, he's got a fair amount of antimony.
And thallium now.
And thallium. You might have to go through what they do again at some point. But I know antimony's bad.
Yes, thallium's very bad as well.
Very bad.
Heavy metal poison.
Okay, I'm sure you explained it in one of the other episodes, but it's been a few weeks since then, so excuse my detailed ignorance here, but yeah. They're both bad.
They're both bad, but they're bad in different ways. That was one of the things he always did. He never poisoned two people in exactly the same way. If he didn't use a completely different poison, then he would poison one slowly and one with a huge dose.
Oh,
so they could be mistaken for different things.
Mistaken for... Was he data gathering?
Yes.
He was absolutely
data gathering.
And he kept record of that?
Yes.
You've told me that before already, haven't you?
Yeah.
In the last episode, but you're like... It blows my mind. I just picture like remember the old school jotters?
Yep.
The pink ones.
Yeah.
With Pinky Peachy on the outside, and you wrote your name and your class and that on it. I picture one of them that had a table in it.
I don't know if it was pink, but he had a school jotter, which he kept all his records of the people he poisoned in school in.
That's mad.
It was experimentation.
Yeah. Thankfully they didn't get yearbooks back then. He'd have just been putting an X through people.
Wow. Now, on the 8th of June, a few days later, Dr. Udwin from Broadmoor saw the man at an outpatient clinic appointment. During this follow-up appointment, Dr. Udwin was pleased to see the appearance of his former patient adjusting well. He would write in one report, "During a long interview, he seemed to me entirely well and surmounting the difficulties of re-establishing himself in an entirely satisfactory manner."
Okay.
He was not.
He was not.
Bob and Dorothy Eagle returned to work after absence due to their illness on the 10th of June, but they felt so depleted from their recent ordeals that they decided to take a week's holiday in Great Yarmouth to recuperate properly.
Fair.
They left on the 19th of June and they had a lovely time.
Oh, sounds nice.
Bob and Dorothy regained strength and had no further additional health issues while they were in Great Yarmouth.
It's almost like they were on a mild cleanse.
They were on a mild cleanse, but this is obviously probably mostly due to the fact that they were temporarily not being poisoned.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I didn't mean the sunshine and the fresh air. I meant the lack of poison in their system.
Yeah, it's also good for you.
No poison is what the doctor orders.
Yeah. On the 28th of June, Bob Eagle returned to work, feeling better than he had for weeks.
He probably felt like a fucking superhero.
Yeah.
Like, if he's suddenly not got poison in his system, he probably feels better than he's ever felt before.
So back to work.
To get poison?
Yeah, he wasn't back to work for long. He returned from work that same afternoon with the recurrence, with a vengeance, of all his previous symptoms and the appearance of some even worse ones. On top of the nausea, joint pain and headaches, Bob was disorientated, and Dorothy would later recall he was staggering just as if he had had too much drink.
I think he's allergic to work.
Maybe
that's it.
Bob Eagle also had a numbing and tingling in his fingers and toes. Caring for him through the night, Dorothy watched his condition worsen until by morning, Bob couldn't feel his hands or feet and said that his lower torso felt numb and ached. Dorothy called a doctor, and Dr. Peter Sparrow arrived at 7 a.m.
Peter Sparrow's a great name.
It is quite a good name.
I'm enjoying this. I like names from history, Alistair. I really do.
Dr. Sparrow was very concerned because Bob seemed to be suffering from peripheral neuritis. He had diminished sensation in his extremities and severe weakness of the legs. The doctor gave Dorothy 2 tablets of an antibiotic to feed to her husband and told her to phone him if Bob deteriorated any further.
If he gets worse, give us a shout.
Exactly. Dorothy had Bob Eagle swallow the 2 pills, but he vomited them back up minutes later along with a thick black fluid.
Not great.
No, it's never good when you vomit tar.
Maybe it's good getting it out.
It is. I've had that Guinness vomit.
Yeah.
Where you yeah.
That's not antimony poisoning, though, Alistair.
No, that's Guinness. Dr. Sparrow was called back at 8 a.m., just an hour later, and he saw a marked and distressing decline in Bob's condition. An ambulance was called, and Bob was rushed to Hemel Hempstead Hospital, where he was examined by Dr. Solomon, who found that Bob had the same symptoms as before, as well as bilateral facial weakness and also trouble swallowing and breathing.
All of his muscles were giving way.
Yeah. He was transferred to St. Albans Hospital, which had better facilities, like respirators for when his lungs gave out.
It feels like a necessity.
Yeah. But doctors there had no ideas or treatments that hadn't been tried already. And Bob Eagle continued to deteriorate with his wife at his hospital bedside.
This is a horrific moment in this podcast, Alistair. I hope you know that.
At the John Hadland's factory, everyone was surprised by the sudden worsening of Bob Eagle's health. Bob was, before this mystery illness, one of the fittest people many of the workers knew. He'd previously served in the army, and he was with the British Expeditionary Force that were evacuated from the beaches of Dunkirk.
Oh, so he was a proper soldier.
He was a tough dude, yeah, and he kept in shape. He was a strong, healthy man who had never suffered a day of illness in his previous many years of service with the company.
Just that 2 weeks where he was really ill, and then he got really good and better, and then a week when he comes back.
Yeah.
Just those really short periods.
Just the times when he was being poisoned.
Just the times when our perpetrator was at his work.
Yeah. Now, the man responsible for Bob's condition was kept updated of it through feigned concern and constant questioning of workers who had actually visited the hospital and the manager's secretaries. One of them, Mrs. Mary Barrow, later recalled his frequent questioning. She said his inquiries were frequent. As a rule, he would stay and chat for a few minutes, and he pressed for all available information. At one stage, Mrs. Eagle mentioned that the illness her husband was suffering from was polyneuritis. This meant nothing to me, and I think I told him. And he explained this illness to me, saying that it was a virus which caused inflammation of the nerve ends. His questions were always, how was Mr. Eagle? Do they know what it is? Is he any better? And what were the symptoms?
Polyneuritis.
Polyneuritis.
A wasting of the nerve ends. Yeah, I was trying to work that out in my head. So, I suppose that could be I don't know. I'm just thinking, like, is that a resulting effect of the poison? Like, is that a long, like, has it actually been damaged, or is he just impaired by the poison?
It's an effect of the poison, but it's also an effect of other conditions which it could easily be misdiagnosed as.
So it could easily be thought of as disease X.
Yeah, it's definitely polyneuritis. The question is it polyneuritis from poison, or polyneuritis caused by Guillain-Barré syndrome?
Okay. No, I just wondered, like, is that it's not a simple. It's quite a diagnosis, is what I mean. It's quite a diagnosis, picking that out of there in the 70s and saying it's polyneuritis, but then not knowing the facts of the condition's origin is the problem here.
Not knowing the cause of the polyneuritis. Yes. You're not wrong. Now, when the man was asking the secretaries these sorts of questions, he was asking how fast Bob Eagle was dying.
Right, okay.
Which was fast.
Pretty quickly.
Yeah. At St. Albans Hospital, where Bob's condition was getting worse by the day, his new doctor wrote, Mr. Eagle continued to deteriorate. Muscle weakness in the face and throat became apparent, which made swallowing difficult. Shortly afterwards, the muscles affecting the breathing became weak, and at this stage, an operation was performed on his windpipe, through which a small tube was inserted and connected to a breathing-assisting machine. However, his condition continued to get worse, with a fall in blood pressure and an increase in the heartbeat. Mr. Eagle then developed pneumonia, which added to his other complaints.
So they've done a tracheotomy.
They've done a tracheotomy, but he's going into complete organ failure.
He's going into cardiac arrest. If his blood pressure's dropped and his heart's working harder, he's about to have a heart attack.
Bob is absolutely right. To the devastation of his wife of over 40 years, Dorothy, Bob Eagle was dying and would pass away on Wednesday the 7th of July. Cause of death was recorded as bronchopneumonia secondary to Guillain-Barré polyneuritis.
But he'd actually been poisoned to death, hadn't he?
Well, he'd actually been poisoned to death. Bob was the first casualty, but by no means the only victim of this man's obsession. He could and did poison many of his co-workers simultaneously, including the delivery driver Ron Hewitt, who, like Bob, had been suffering unexplained bouts of illness, which nobody thought could be poisoning.
No chance of that.
Luckily, Ron found work as a driver elsewhere and left John Hadland on the 9th of July. By this point, so many were feeling ill randomly that it had become known as the Bovingdon bug.
The Bovingdon bug is something Alan said to me down there.
Yeah. Meanwhile, on the 12th of July, the man attended the second funeral of someone he had killed. This time, Bob Eagle.
So his mother first.
Yeah.
And then Bob second.
And now Bob. Bob was cremated and his ashes encased in an oak casket, upon which a plaque was fixed bearing his name.
I don't like this. Like, it feels like you're almost doing third person about me. I'm really struggling with this. And then Bob was cremated. I'm sad for him, but it's the way you're looking at me while you say it.
With Bob dead...
I took over this podcast.
That is genuinely the next words, though. With Bob dead...
Oh, no.
The man who killed him was actually instantly promoted at John Hadland Limited to that of head storeman.
Head storeman?
Yeah.
I was a head storeman when I started my current work.
Nice.
And now I'm not.
No.
I'd probably be... No, I like my job. Carry on.
Yeah, your job was cool. Come on. Now, whether he killed him, that is, Bob Eagle, for personal gain or for curiosity, we will likely never really know. Not many of his crimes were motivated by any desire to acquire anything, except perhaps the twisted thrill of the power over someone else. But in this case, the man obviously did quite well as a result of his first murder since he was released from Broadmoor 6 months earlier.
Is he gaining something?
He's getting a better job.
No, he's also gaining... I'm going to go down the line of knowledge. Like,
He's getting knowledge all the time, but that's satisfying his curiosity.
So, I mean, I think what I've gathered from the 2.5 episodes we've done now is the man was literally thirsty for knowledge about, a specifically niche topic.
Yeah.
The human resistance to poison. And he didn't really care who suffered in any way along the route. But
he had no empathy.
It was knowledge gathering.
Yes.
And that, I suppose, if you, and I won't, but if to pose you that moment, if that's his main goal, then killing somebody is another knowledge point.
He only gains information, yeah.
Yeah. Because he certainly didn't give a fuck that he'd done it.
No. Absolutely no remorse whatsoever. But Bob Eagle's death also brought the man's next victim, Fred Biggs, into his sphere of influence.
That might be my first album, The Sphere of Influence. Yeah, I like it.
Fred Biggs was a part-time storekeeper for the Work in Progress department. And as such, he knew the man quite well as a colleague, and indeed he actually got on quite well with him. They often shared a cup of tea and talked about such common topics as effective insecticides.
Fine. I've got a garden, and I need that shit.
Yeah. It's not as odd a topic as I made out, so they sound there. The two men had many conversations, obviously. And Fred Biggs was a very keen gardener.
I was going to say, like, I've not got... most of my garden's lawn, but I've got my raised planters that I built. And, like, effective use of insecticides. Dude, we're in our 40s now. I'm into that.
I know. And Fred mentioned to the man that some insect was destroying the flowers in his garden. But the reason I'm referencing this conversation specifically is that the man proposed a fairly shocking solution. 1 gallon of water with 10 grams of thallium dissolved in it would certainly deal with any insects on those plants.
Yeah.
The man even went a stage further and a few days later brought 15 grams of thallium into work for Fred, instructing him not to handle it without gloves.
So here's the 10 grams that I said you needed and a wee extra 5 grams.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure we've met dealers like that.
Nope.
Smooth. Fred took the thallium, but he never actually used it, and it was later recovered unopened by the authorities.
Oh, good. I don't think... I presume it would have been absorbed into the food.
Yeah.
He would have been growing in his garden.
Yeah, it would have.
It's not just killing the slugs.
No, but yeah, no.
Would it make the food...
I don't know if it was an attempt to harm Fred in that case, though.
I'm just wondering, like, Fred's going to grow some carrots on it or some shit. Is there then... Have you then got thallium carrots?
Yes, you would technically then have thallium carrots. They could quite easily be absorbed. Heavy metals can be absorbed into
Maybe this
foodstuffs.
was another data point, man.
It could well have been. I can't deny it, but it was for flowers, I think, not vegetables.
Okay, fine.
I think.
Thallium roses.
Yeah. Which you could also eat.
Which you
Rose
can.
petals are edible.
Rosehip juice is lovely.
Okay, but I don't think that he was trying to poison them.
Sorry, that might be the most tangent of tangents I've done in a while. I apologise.
How did we get onto rosehip juice? Anyway, Fred Biggs was a healthy, strong man who, much like Bob Eagle, had rarely suffered any illnesses in his life. In July of 1971, though, he was given extra shifts in the main stores department where the man worked. And it was not long after that Fred Biggs began to show similar unexplained symptoms to the other people at John Hadland.
There's a pattern.
Yeah. His wife, Annie, recalled the date at around the start of August. Fred went to work one day fine, and then by lunchtime, after the morning tea break, had to be driven home by a colleague because he couldn't stop vomiting.
So, he's getting ill.
Yes. He would return to work after a few days. Another victim, Diana Smart, was a company secretary, and she also fell ill. Norman Smart, her husband, was also afflicted, but not as early because Norman didn't like the man who was poisoning everyone's tea at his leisure, so he didn't drink as much of the tea that he brought round.
If you think the guy's a dick, you're not taking a cup of tea off him anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Norman had never liked him. He found the topics of conversation morbid and creepy, and his odd habits, such as working in near darkness, annoying.
He was a vampire.
I don't know. He did like to work in darkness, though. Some of the people that worked under him noted that about him. He wouldn't let them have the lights on.
It'll be fine outside the settle tonight.
He would. It's pitch black out there.
Yeah, some car crashed into the massive electricity pylon.
Throughout August and September of 1971, many workers in John Hadfield fell ill with what became known as the Bovingdon bug.
The Bovingdon bug is a man poisoning people.
It is, in reality, the man who had been declared cured and safe to return to society was, in fact, neither of those things and had begun coldly poisoning those around him again, seemingly almost at random.
He'd literally just gone, pause the game, go to jail for 8 years, unpause the game,
Yes,
crack on.
he had. And even the poisons seemed slightly random. The man was known to be an expert on all types of toxins, and many of the victims did present with very different symptoms, although thallium was definitely his poison of choice for killing people. He had before poisoned many of his school friends with other toxins as well, just to see their effects. And what was almost certainly a repeat of this behaviour, he was doing it again.
Yeah, he literally unpaused the game and gone on again.
Yeah. Diana Smart, who I already mentioned, had some very odd symptoms, actually. Along with her nausea, she experienced awful-smelling feet.
Oh. I mean, that's weird.
But to the point where her husband Norman couldn't sleep because of the smell.
Wow.
Her sense of taste also changed dramatically.
Well, it would do if your feet stunk that bad.
She no longer liked the taste of coffee or tea, and she complained that she curdled milk when her lips touched the glass or cup that it was in.
Right. I mean...
Yep.
I think that's like the most simple summary I can give to that. But like, it's mad because none of that's related. Like, do you know if you get a sore left arm, it's in your heart, sore right arm, blah blah blah. Smelly feet and can't taste things, never a relationship.
Probably not. Who knows?
I don't know. It's
It's
feels
impossible to know what he was poisoning them with.
So there's no record of what he used on individual people.
There's what he used to kill individual people.
Right. Okay.
But even that, wide-ranging as the effects of thallium poisoning can be, because that's what he preferred to use to kill.
So we get off the school jotter amount of notes when he comes back out of jail. He's not documenting as much.
He's going to start documenting again, Bob.
But he hasn't done so far.
No, not so far.
Including the second murder that he's responsible for.
Yeah.
He didn't document that.
No.
But he goes back to doing it.
Yes.
I mean, like, it's a baffling brain. I just genuinely don't get what's going on up here. Like, what?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
At the beginning of October, David Tilson, another store worker, also fell ill. He recalls in his own words, "There had been times when I've been working in the stores when I've been offered tea and biscuits by him. I only used to have a few mouthfuls of the tea because he used to put sugar in it, which I don't like."
Wasn't sugar, was it?
It might have been sugar to mask the taste of something else.
That's true, yeah. He was definitely putting something in it.
He was. Thallium.
Thallium.
David Tilson remembers on Friday the 8th of October accepting a cup of tea from the man, but only drinking half of it due to the odd sweet taste. The next morning, David awoke to a numbness in his fingers and toes. The symptoms remained for 4 or 5 days, but the pins and needles in his legs and the stiff joints remained, along with chest pain. So he saw a doctor, who examined him, but could find nothing wrong. She prescribed 2 paracetamol 3 times a day for the chest pain, which she thought might be muscular.
Pull the muscle in your ribs. Crack on.
Exactly. Now, there's going to be quite a bit of quoting coming up, because as Bob just alluded to, just like when he was a boy poisoning his friends and family, the man started keeping a diary.
That's mental. Like, I genuinely, like, I only asked you that because I thought we were beyond it now. But
Nope. A record of his actions in his own words. And the first entry of that diary is on the 12th of October, 1971.
It's only 11 years before I was born, Al.
Now, he will use letters to represent people, such as D was David Tilson, B was Bob Eagle, F was Fred Biggs, etc., etc.
And we know that for a fact.
We know that for a fact.
Okay.
So, on the 12th of May, he wrote, "My fears proved to be unfounded. D," that's David Tilson's, "malady was diagnosed as fibrostitis, which saves me the trouble and the risk of playing the sympathetic hospital visitor in order to finish the job. Had the illness proved sufficiently serious to demand D's hospitalization, I could not have taken the chance that prolonged observation might have revealed the true cause of the trouble. Had, as was intended, the full amount been ingested, the resultant illness would have had a fatal resolution within 7 to 10 days, conforming in all aspects to Guillain-Barré syndrome, and the death would have been diagnosed as such. If, however, the illness had extended into weeks, as would have been the case with so small a quantity, certain of the symptoms would present an atypical picture which may have jerked in the minds of the medicals, leading to a re-diagnosis. Had this been the case, it's quite likely that the similarity of the symptoms to those preceding the death of Bob Eagle, B in this, may have been recognised and the death certificate subject to closer scrutiny. So all in all, I am quite satisfied with the situation. Now I have time to reassess and decide upon my course of action."
So there's a lot to digest and well read, and sometimes when you're reading these quotes, I know sometimes when you read quotes, you have to just get through them, even though it's quite a
and there's a few to come.
And is there? Okay. But that's essentially, he's saying he's overjoyed at getting away with it.
Yes.
Because
in this case, he has administered a non-lethal dose for an extended period of time to make the symptoms look like Guillain-Barré, a neurological problem.
And do we think he's measured that enough to match this? He's picked that condition.
He's picked his dose to match that condition, exactly.
There's that level of knowing that if I give him this much, it will mask.
And he's actually a little upset that he hasn't drank the entire coffee, because that changes the dose.
A different data point.
Exactly. Now, from that first entry, we're already seeing the same cold, calculated recording of people suffering that we saw when he was an 11 to 13-year-old boy.
Quite a detailed recording then.
And it is, it's very detailed. And his course of action that he mentioned.
Is it, sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all.
Is it like, I'm picturing almost a like completely impersonal thing. So like subject A gets this amount.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons he would have reduced their names to letters. It's dehumanizing.
Yeah, so like his notes wouldn't have been like Craig's getting 50 mil.
No.
I know that's really simplifying, but you know what I mean. It was literally, he was using them as test subjects.
Yes. He absolutely was. And he mentions having time to reassess and decide upon his next course of action. His next course of action was to decide on his next target, and he also recorded that in his diary as well.
Of course he did, because he's a fucking idiot, but really smart as well.
In his diary he writes, "I think R," which references John Durant, "is the most logical choice. So it is now merely a question of opportunity. He should visit this week, and a chance should occur then. This time I must restrain my tendency towards over-liberal dosage, and administer the minimum necessary to achieve the desired effect. Too much, and the same will happen as with D," that's David Tilson. "Taste will be noticeably altered and insufficient consumed, presenting the same panoply of problems. Also, I shall revert to the same medium as with B," that's Bob Eagle. Using the crystalline form renders it far easier to gauge the exact dosage and also safeguards against partial decomposition, as I suspect may have happened with Dee's solution.
You're right. I mean, it is detailed, isn't it? Like,
It's incredibly detailed.
he's weighing up the difference between, like, pre-preparing a solution and doing it on site, and he's weighing up the difference between, like, if I give too much, I'm going to kill again, and that wasn't the outcome he was looking for.
Not yet.
There's a huge amount in that, 100 words or something?
Yes.
Incredible amount of information there into his, I'm not going to say mindset, because obviously it is a snapshot, but, like, his thought process on what he was doing.
Yeah, and there is a lot more, which we don't have time to quote everything tonight, obviously. There is an entire diary of...
is it the diary you're directly quoting from? Is that the book that you've got
Yes.
there? Yeah.
Yeah, and tonight I'll be quoting from his own diary, and also a little bit from A Passion for Poison, Carol Ann Lee's book, which is a fabulous resource for anybody who wants to know even more detail than we've gone into tonight.
And we're on
And
episode
over the past
3 of
3 or 4 weeks. Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Now, he also wrote extensively about David Tillman. He wrote, Dee returned to work today, and this afternoon I was able to inquire after his health. It appears that he is suffering muscular pain and stiffness from the chest downwards, of a general distribution. He has intense numbness in both feet. It would seem, therefore, that the quantity ingested was larger than I originally estimated, perhaps as much as 300 milligrams. The symptoms point so clearly to polyneuritis that the competence of Dee's physician is questionable, to say the least. It is not certain that alopecia will later develop, but it would be quite consistent with a dose of this size. If it occurs, this will doubtless drive Dee to the doctor again, but happily, by the time hair loss becomes sufficiently noticeable to prompt this step, excretion of the drug is likely to have ended. In this case, the dose was relatively small, which is another factor which may cause Dee concern and possibly worry his physician, is the protracted course of the illness. The symptoms will remit only gradually. Recovery in these cases is always very slow. Full sensation should return to his feet, and for the muscular impairment to resolve itself, it may take as long as 2 to 3 months. Fibrotitis is an acute form to persist for so long. It's unusual, and ultimately, a diagnosis of polyneuritis may well be made. We shall see. The case interests me greatly, and it affords me an opportunity to observe the effects of a sublethal dose. Now, what we're seeing here...
Sorry, 2 secs. So, is he testing the doctors as well?
He's not testing the doctors.
I just take away from that, like, the latter maybe 20% of that. Let's see what they come back with. It's very much like...
He's not testing the doctor. Well, he is slightly testing the doctors.
No, I think he fully is, because he's essentially getting away with this. To the point where he can almost go, let's see if I can make them believe that they've got an illness.
Yes.
And
then mocking them for not believing that they have that illness quick enough.
It's all power.
Yes.
It's literally all power.
No, yeah, exactly. And we're also seeing a complete return to the exact same behaviour he displayed as a 12 to 13-year-old boy. He's poisoning people, as you say, for the power trip and out of curiosity to see what happens.
Is he still the 12 to 13-year-old boy?
I think so.
Yeah. It just feels like that 8 years in prison hasn't
done a single thing.
It's not changed his mindset at all.
No.
And it's almost that ability to white lie that a young boy has to do. He's literally living on the white lie of, no, I'm okay, nobody needs to look at me. Also, drink this.
Yeah. Now, it seemed from the diary that the man had decided his next victim would be John Durant.
And that was R. You said that in the last...
Yes.
Okay.
If that's what I said, then that's what it was.
I do listen to you, Alistair.
However, Durant wasn't in everyday contact with the man, which was what made him a less suspicious victim, actually. But it also gave the man less opportunities to administer poison. Now, whether the man changed his mind, or whether he decided he couldn't wait until he saw Durant, and despite apparently genuinely liking Jethro Bat, who worked alongside him in the storeroom, on the 15th of October, Jethro accepted a mug of tea from the man, which tasted even odder and sweeter than usual.
Masking something.
After one gulp, Jethro put the mug aside, but he was left with a very bitter aftertaste. 20 minutes later, Jethro was experiencing terrible stomach pains, but also an inability to vomit. He developed leg pain and also stiffness of the joints.
That's really bad. Like, he's internally wanting to gip, but can't.
Exactly.
That's bad.
Must be terrible. The man who poisoned him wrote in the diary on the 18th of October, several new developments. D, that's David Tillman's, symptoms have considerably worsened over the weekend. The paresthesia and anesthesia now render it difficult for him to walk at all, and apparently this morning he was unable to walk up the stairs. He was not at work, of course, but telephoned in to explain his absence. Later in the morning, he called back to notify P that his doctor now diagnosed a glandular complaint. How much further the illness will progress is difficult to say at this stage. A second development, and one that I now regret, is that J, that's Biggs, has been afflicted. The administration was Friday night, and as only part of the dose was ingested, it's difficult to say how severe the resultant illness will be. The symptoms have been slower to manifest themselves than in the case of D, but have been gradually appearing during the afternoon. J complains of an insidiously spreading muscular ache, accompanied by stomach pains and flatulence. The latter symptoms, however, are probably due to a mild stomach germ, which seems to have been currently doing the rounds.
It just happens. Just happens.
Sometimes.
Don't worry about it.
Sometimes shit just happens.
Yeah. Not in this case, though.
No. And it's, again, frightening how calmly you can record these things. Over the next few weeks, his recorded victims got progressively worse. On the 26th of October, Diana Smart, David Tilson, and Jethro Bat were all absent due to illness. So the man responsible for their suffering took the opportunity to deliver another dose to Fred Biggs.
Well, he can't have himself just bumming about doing nothing.
Yeah, he
now.
can't poison nobody.
Yeah, I mean, imagine that, just poisoning nobody.
After drinking a cup of poisoned tea, Fred Biggs was taken home after lunch with debilitating stomach pains and sore joints. Also the ubiquitous sickness and diarrhea. On the 20th of October, John Durant visited the factory and the storehouse. John Durant was chosen as the man's next target in his diary, remember. And now the man took the opportunity to bring him a nice cup of tea.
2 sugars.
Yes, like some horrible version of Mrs. Doyle from Father Ted.
Go on, go on, go on, go on.
John Durant accepts the cup of tea from the man after the 14th or 15th go on.
Go on, go on.
He made small talk with the man while he drank the tea. He remarked that it had a strange taste, as if it had been brewed for too long. The following morning, John Durant woke with a terrible headache and pains in his shoulder.
Is it from the poisoned tea?
It's from the
drank?
poisoned tea, yes.
I love the deadpanness we've got to you tonight, Alistair.
It's from the poisoned tea.
It's from the poisoned tea.
Now, all of this man's victims were in and out of hospital over the next few weeks. And it's all recorded in his diary, which is available to read online. And I think it was published, although I'm not positive of that, and it's hard to get hold of. But I'd like to read another excerpt now, and I can't promise that it'll even be the last one. There is much to communicate since my last entry. Di, which is Diana Smart, who I afflicted with a mild attack of gastroenteritis on October the 20th, was subject to a further indisposition on the 22nd, the result of which caused violent vomiting and diarrhea throughout the weekend. I believe she is now suitably chastened. D, that's David Tillman, is now discharged from hospital, but still unwell, so I do not expect to see him for some time. His illness was finally diagnosed as an unidentified virus. Jack Biggs, is still off work, suffering from similarly mysterious virus. It is unlikely that the symptoms will recede with any great rapidity. I shall not expect to see him for the next week or fortnight. F, Fred Biggs, whom I grew to like, has been the most recent subject of my attention. I have administered a fatal dose of the special compound, which was thallium, to him and anticipate reports of his illness on Monday. He should die within the week, his death being attributed to acute intermittent porphyria. I gave him 3 separate doses, each of about 5 to 6 grams. The total absorbed should be about 15 to 16 grams, which constitutes a lethal dose.
So he it's ridiculous to say that at this point he really knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Like he's done his research is a really belittling way of talking about poisoning people over a period of 30 odd years.
But it's also true that he reads medical texts. He knows the exact progression of these different toxins, even in different doses, to have them mimic different syndromes and different illnesses.
That's what I was going to say to you.
It's
like
staggering.
You talk at the beginning of that quote there, and feel free to skip back and listen to it again because there's a lot to take in. But you talk about he was trying to simulate the diseases. He was literally he knew that if I gave them this, the doctors would prescribe this or diagnose this. Sorry,
exactly. If I give him this large fatal dose all at once, it will likely be misdiagnosed as polyneuritis for Guillain-Barré. If I give him a lesser dose over a longer period of time, it will likely be misdiagnosed as fibrostaitis.
Yeah, you had to say those words there. You looked at me as if I was going to finish your sentence there.
I did. I'm sorry.
Fibrostaitis is the answer, Ali. I'm not finishing your sentence. Do you know what it is? And I know I've gone, after all of your quotes, I've already said the guy was smart and everything. It's the level of computation that goes into this. Like, remove the empathy aspect of him actually caring about what he did to people.
Because he doesn't.
The science, it's almost like, I don't know, like fucking Data from Star Trek Next Gen or something. It's literally as
emotionless.
Yeah, totally. It's like, this is the facts that I'm learning.
It is.
I fucking hate it.
It's frightening. Now, I read that last quote for a number of reasons. It shows, again, the unfeeling way in which the man records the suffering of people that are meant to be his friends. But it also tells us the specific doses he was using and that he knew that they were fatal and that he was very familiar with the progression of these toxins in varying doses to mimic other drugs or other illnesses. But it also shows his sense of superiority. At the beginning, he mentions having suitably chastened Diana Smart by giving her gastroenteritis twice. Now, this is a punishment for a mild offence, a mild indiscretion, should I say, in the office. But it demonstrates the low regard that he holds others in and the inflated regard that he has for himself. He thinks himself good enough to judge and chasten those around him.
He sees himself as a superior, clearly.
Power trip, 100%.
Well, as I said, this is all about power.
It is. The power over others. On the 1st of November, David Tilson was readmitted to hospital. As well as his already listed symptoms, his hair was now falling out in clumps. Fred Biggs was rushed to hospital the very next day. Fred had now developed numbness in his hands and feet and a loss of reflex and sensory loss. Meanwhile, David Tilson's doctors were pondering this new and rapid hair loss, and for the first time, they were considering heavy metal poisoning.
Because it's a different poison?
Because rapid hair loss is very unusual. There aren't many things that present with rapid hair loss.
Right, okay.
That's why it really should have been an alarm bell way before when somebody in the hostel presented with it.
It's just been sadly overlooked.
Yeah, exactly. Now, already concerned about heavy metal poisoning were John Hadland's management, although for very different reasons. They were worried that one of their processes could actually be contaminating the factory somehow, and it might be their fault.
And they're the photography.
They're the photography company.
So the chemicals that we mentioned earlier, they're worried that they're the cause.
Yeah, exactly. They do use thallium somehow in their factory. I can't remember how now, but it wasn't connected to our man in any way, shape or form.
But they do the dutiful thing as a company and go, is it us?
Exactly. They contract the district medical officer, Dr. Hind, but he sends Dr. Dennis Trott first to inspect the site on the 11th of November. Dr. Trott is remarkably unconcerned with what he finds in the factory. It doesn't look like there's any contamination or any leaking or anything like that anywhere. But he is disturbed by what, to be honest, the man says to him during brief conversation. So the next day, he returns with his direct superior, Dr. Hind, to do a more in-depth inspection, which included interviewing all the staff as well as inspecting the facility. Both doctors were put ill at ease by the man's answers and to his questions when they questioned him. So, arrangements were made for a sort of staff awareness meeting later in the month.
Just to be, let's get together and have a chat.
Let's get together and have a chat. Why is everyone getting sick?
Yeah. What he's all up to out of hours. Come on, what's going on here?
Pretty much, yeah. Fred Biggs, in hospital, his condition continued to decline. And on the 18th of November, he suffered a cardiac arrest and died.
Fairly same scenario that we've seen before.
The second casualty of this man's ego and curiosity since being released from Broadmoor.
Ego and curiosity. Well put, Alistair.
Now, John Hadland himself now called in a Dr. Arthur Anderson to speak to the staff about Fred's death and about the Bovingdon bug.
Of course, I forgot about the Bovingdon bug. It's cracking on.
Dr. Anderson spoke for about 15 minutes and then he took questions.
As you do.
The man responsible for the Bovingdon bug was the first to question the doctor. And I'd like to read a little of the conversation. He asked some odd questions and some incriminating questions, actually.
Of himself?
Yes.
Right, okay.
So Dr. Anderson asked for questions, and the man responsible for the poisoning stood up and asked, what were the similarities in symptoms of the two people who died and the two people who were ill?
Reasonable question.
Reasonable question. Dr. Anderson tells him that there was no definite link between those who died and those who were ill. The man then asks, what is the significance of alopecia suffered by Mr. Bat and Mr. Tilson?
Reasonable question.
Yep. And Dr. Anderson says, in the case of Jethro Bat, this may be due to a nervous condition or stress.
Nope.
The man nods and says, so complete alopecia due to psychosomatic stimulus then?
Great sentence.
Yep. Dr. Anderson's a bit surprised, obviously, but he says, yes, this could have been the case, as Mr. Bat showed signs of extreme nervous strain. Then, the man says, and would you say that Mr. Bat and Mr. Tilson's symptoms are consistent with thallium poisoning?
Just as a random question.
Yep.
Just throwing that out there.
Yep. Now, obviously, Mr. Anderson is shocked. He would later write, I was completely taken aback. I'd always considered the possibility that the illness and death were being caused by some form of heavy metal industrial poisoning, but I was deliberately playing this possibility down in front of the staff because I didn't want to alarm them. Here, He was shouting his mouth off about the subject. He completely lost me in what he was saying. I knew a little about the effects of thallium poisoning, but at that stage I knew nothing of the neurological damage thallium could do. He was talking about that type of damage. I tried to shut him up because I was trying to play down that sort of danger, and he was going on and on. Eventually I managed to get him silenced for a while. I didn't suspect him of causing the trouble when he mentioned thallium, but I suspected it could be thallium poisoning if the factory used it in the manufacture of camera lenses. A quick check with the factory management dismissed any likelihood of industrial poisoning by thallium because none was ever stocked there.
So they managed to do the right thing, do their investigation, and rule themselves out.
They did the investigation and had ruled out thallium because they didn't actually use thallium
In their process.
in their processes in that factory.
Right, fine.
But now suspicions are being raised by the fact that the symptoms match thallium poisoning, and now...
We don't know where the thallium's coming from.
Yeah. But Dr. Hind, following this meeting with the staff and Dr. Anderson, interviewed the man again. And during this interview, he insisted on knowing where the man had been treated for his mental illness in his early life.
Okay. For a purpose, like, was he laying blame to his predecessors? Predecessors is the wrong word there, but you know what I mean?
Yes.
The predecessors, the people that have diagnosed and cured him before.
Exactly.
He's laying blame there.
He's not laying blame there. He told the man responsible for the poisonings that he needed the information to complete staff records.
The suspicion's there.
The suspicion's there. He did it, in fact, because he was suspicious. He knew that this man had been in a mental institution for something, but he didn't know which mental institution. He didn't know what mental institution.
What purpose.
He didn't know what for.
Yeah.
He got him to admit that he was in Broadmoor.
Wow.
Which set off further alarm bells.
Of course it would, yes.
As it obviously would. And also we see here another behaviour that we saw all those years ago. The man is casting suspicion on himself with what he's saying. He's suggesting thallium poisoning. He knows they've been poisoned with thallium.
Of course he does, but he's playing the genius fool, isn't he?
Yeah. And he did the same thing when he poisoned people in his early teens. It's not that he wants to be caught. His diary records his fears of possible discovery. It's more to me like he wants to be known and thinks himself too clever to actually ever be caught.
But he's already been caught.
He doesn't know that yet.
He did 8 years in jail.
Yes, but he thinks he's smarter now.
Oh, he's learned.
He's learned.
He's done exactly the same thing since he left.
Yes.
He's learned fuck all.
It's true. So witnessing this odd interaction, as well as finally seeing the common denominator in all the suspicious illnesses, leads John Hadland to suspect the man responsible and to report that suspicion to the police. And the doctors as well report it independently to the police.
Oh, good.
This would lead to the investigation that we will talk about next time in this ever-expanding rabbit hole that I am currently going down with this case.
Join us next time on Twisted Britain for Part 4.
Part 4, which might be the final part. Who knows? I'm taking you down this rabbit hole with me. If I'm going down, you're all going down with me.
Part 4 of this trilogy. It's late.
Yep.
You need to go.
It's been a while. Good luck with editing this one as well.
Thanks very much. I mean, I've got fucking 18 and a half hours of the first 2 episodes to deal with. But we'll come back for another episode, obviously. We have to come back to find the conclusion of this case.
I'm dealing with his arrest and trial in a 4th episode.
There are 2 things, but they're going to be 1 episode. Are you making? Are we going?
It's going to be 1 episode.
One more episode to wrap us up.
One more episode.
One more episode to wrap us up. Look, if you're this deep into this and you don't like what you're listening to, why the hell are you still here?
Yeah.
So the next episode will be out next week. Ali has spent... Well, Ali gave up his job and moved to Bournemouth and wrote this.
Pretty much, that's almost true.
This is what's happened. So if you don't like it, this is literally the premiere of Alistair. This is the best we're gonna get.
Yeah, you're not going to get more research out of me than this.
No, I will hold you to that.
I will never know more about something than I know about this.
You say that, but I know you better than anybody that listens to this podcast, Alistair. And I know the next time you find something that has anything to do with a ship
Oh, I do love boats.
that left Bournemouth, we're getting an 8-parter.
Oh, my God.
We'll come back to that. Thank you very much for part 3.
Bournemouth Naval episode.
Yep. I'm surprised you've not written it yet.
Why haven't I done this yet?
Very surprised at that. Teacup Poisoner part 3 complete.
Done.
Teacup Poisoner part 4 next time you listen to us.
Yep. He's killed 2 people. Will he get away with it? No.
No. Will he kill more?
No.
Oh, well, you've ruined that fucking cliffhanger, haven't you?
But how he is convicted is very interesting, and there's some fantastic forensic advancements involved in the investigation.
So stick with us for part.
Stay with us for that. We really are getting old.
Stick with us for the most.
For improvements in forensic examination procedure.
Do you know what? I'm excited about it. And if you're listening to this and you're not excited about it,
Something wrong.
listen to something else.
Yeah, this is not for you.
I'm going to leave you with a thank you, love you, bye.
And a thank you, love you, bye.
Thank you, bye. I can hear myself.